Hey there, this is Jonathan, and in the following tutorial we're going to take a look at some different strategies for creating interactive projects in Adobe Edge Animate. Now what I've got here is basically kind of a microsite idea that I'm going with, and it's got three different sections, and those are these three different buttons up here at the top. I'm going to change the text with code here in just a second. But I've got my three different sections, and each of these sections is its own independent timeline. Now, each of these sections is also the exact same size as the main stage. So I want to point out how important this is to do. So the first thing that you want to do is anytime you're creating something else, make sure of course you change your width and your height to be the correct size before you get working. I'm just going to use the default here. But I create some sort of graphic that fits the exact same size as my stage. Then I convert it to a symbol. Now when I convert it to a symbol, I'm going to go ahead and call this section 1, and I just put a dash anim because that way I know it's going to be like its own timeline. You could do a dash sym so that you know it's a symbol or something like that. Doesn't really matter exactly what your naming convention is. That's kind of up to you. But you do want to be consistent. Now inside this, you'll see that my registration point is set to the same 0 as my main stage. The reason this is important is because you want this not to be moved from that 0, 0. It's really nice when you can register things like symbols to 0 when that registration is crucial. Now inside this symbol, I can put whatever I want because it's got its own background. It'll hide anything that's on the main background. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete that symbol for right now. It still exists in the main library. And then I'll go ahead and create my next symbol. Same sort of process, convert it to a symbol. I'll call this one section 2-SYM since that's the naming convention I'm using right now. Go inside of it and maybe give it a different color just so I can tell the difference. Alright, going back to the stage. Now, if I like, I can add this one back to the stage at this point. Now, what we do is at the beginning of our project, we're going to hide the different sections we don't want. So with composition ready, I'm just going to go ahead and say show and hide the sections that I don't want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and hide section 2. And then I'm going to copy that code and hide or show section 1. So this way I can show which one I want. So right now I'm showing the gray box. Now instead, if I wanted, I could go ahead and show section 2 and hide section 1. Well, that should work. Let's see what I got here. Oh, I don't have it spelled right. That's my problem. Let me go and check that again. Does matter when you spell things correctly. So that's kind of the principle of what we're going on. Now the only difference is that then we'll use buttons to show and hide them as well. So if I go back to my sample, here's what I've got. I've got, on my stage, I've got three different sections. I've got my home animation, my section 1, and my section 2. My home just has a little bit of yellow background and some text. Then my section 1 has a green background, a little bit more text, and my section 2 has a blue background, text, and an element in here. But there's nothing else on that timeline. Now on the main timeline, first thing I do is hide the two sections and then show the home section. Now of course I'm changing the text on my buttons as well, and that's what's going on there. So then on each button, so let me go to the home button. On the code for that one, what I do is I show the home section and hide the other two. Then I can go down and look at the other buttons. I just do the same exact thing. I hide the home animation and show the section 1 and hide the other. You guessed it, on section 2, I'm hiding both section 1 and home and showing the section 2. So this is a very simple way to create a simple and effective animated, or not animated, but different sections or as symbols in Edge Animate. I think this is preferable than trying to jump to different labels and manage that. This is really nice when you have each of the different sections in their own symbol. Now, I've done just a little bit different with this next version, and the only difference with this is now what I do is I tell it to play. So I've got all the same code. The only difference is when I load or when I show the animation, I tell it to play from the very beginning. Now inside that particular animation, I have just a quick, or symbol, I have just a quick animation where things fade in and then they stop at a certain point. So at this trigger, we have sim.stop. And that's pretty much it. Each animation or each symbol has its own quick little animation where things fade in and then stop. Once again, it fades in and it stops. Now inside here, this one I have a special little button. Here I have a button that when I click on this, it's going to jump back to the main level. So I need to look at my code that I have in here. Because the first thing that we're going to do is hide this timeline. And this sim.getSymbolElement right here, this basically says hide me. So it says sim, which is the timeline, get the symbol element that says get the timeline that we're currently on, and then hide it. Then here I have sim, get composition, get stage. This goes back to the main timeline, finds the animation called home anim, and then shows it, and then we go back to the main timeline, we get the timeline for home animation, and we play it from 0. Now notice that we have a dollar sign here, and a dollar sign means that we're using this home animation as a element, whereas get symbol says let's use it as a timeline. Now to see where these come from, we can actually use the picker here down at the bottom. So there we can see it down here. And the first one we did was show, so let's do hide, or hide show. We'll show, we'll go back to the main stage, we'll find in our sections the home animation, and we'll double click on that. And you'll see that's how we got that code. Same thing with the other one. We do sim get symbol play, so we'll do play from, let's see, go back to the stage, find the one called home, and we can double click on it there, and we're going to play from 0. So that's how I got the code that's there. I just like to get rid of the comments and put my own comments in. I think that's more effective often. So that's what's going on. Here's the problem with this particular animation though. I have some text on the home screen, and each time I click, because all I'm doing is hiding this current one and then fading in the new one, you'll see that whatever text I have on the main timeline will show for just that quick little section. So you have two options. One option is to make sure that your main timeline pretty much doesn't have anything on it. That way, maybe if it just has a background, and if you share that background element between other things, it won't look so funky when it switches. Now the other thing that we can do is possibly make just the content fade in and make our backgrounds happen immediately. So if we take a look at this, got the same sort of code. All we're doing is just playing the animations, showing them and playing them. But when I go inside of each one, it starts off with the background layer already being 100% there, and then we fade in the content itself, and then it stops. So same thing with section 1. The background color is there to begin with, and then the content fades in and the timeline stops. Same thing with section 2. It comes in and stops. Now for some reason I forgot to animate this text, so that would be pretty easy. We just go in here and add our little animation right there. Take that back to 0. I love the toggle pin animation. And now you can see I can animate that in too. Now we've got the same thing that we had there before, where we go ahead and hide the timeline we're currently on. When we click on this button, we show the main timeline, and then we play it from 0. But since the background color is already there at the beginning, we never really see whatever is on the main timeline. We only see the backgrounds that are there, and it makes the transition from one section to another pretty quick when it comes to the backgrounds. So I think that's a pretty good method. So these are three very effective and simple ways for you to create some sort of structure. Now I do have one other way that I'm going to show just because it's a little bit fancier, but it's pretty cool. Now with this particular one, what I'm doing that's different is that I'm going to create a variable, and this variable says what is the last section that I just played, or what is the current section that is visible. Everything else pretty much looks the same right now. However, if I go into my different sections, you'll see I've got a place where it animates in, and then it animates out as well. And then when it gets to this end trigger, that's the trigger that tells the symbol element to hide, which means that once it plays this out section, it gets to that section, boom, and it's hidden. Now, I should have pointed out something earlier, and that is the reason that we hide things is because then it gets it completely off of the timeline. We can't interact with it if it's completely hidden. That's a lot better than changing something to opacity 0, which we could possibly click on it and stuff, even if it's set to 0. So that's why we like to hide and unhide things. Now, going back to this, here we've got an in section, and then it stops, and then we have an out section later, and it fades out, and at the end of that, it hides that symbol. Now, what we do on the main timeline for our buttons is I've got some special code here, and does things a little bit different. I actually reorganized this, I think, in another file that I had, so I think this is a better way to do it. So the first thing that we're going to do is set a variable, quick variable, for whatever is the timeline that we want to play. Since we're on section 1 button, we're going to play the section 1 animation. Makes sense. Then this code right here finds out if there was a variable already set for current section. And since when we started this, we set the variable to, I think, the home-anim, that means that right here it runs this code if the current, that is the current section variable, is empty, or really it says here is not empty, then go ahead and take whatever that setting was and play it during its out section. And the next code, what this does is it shows whatever is the next one, which is section 1 anim. It gets the symbol and plays that from the 0, and then it sets the variable to that item. Now we could easily have just copied and pasted this code. We could take this and copy and paste it into these at each place. But that's a lot of places that I have to change that. And that's why we use variables whenever possible for things that are going to be repetitive. So now all the rest of them will have this exact same code, which is really cool. The only difference is that we'll change whatever the var next equals. So if I go into there, let's go into section 2 button, and you'll see I've got it a little bit out of order, so I'm going to get that from there and put that up at the top. And in the section, let's see the home button, that'll probably be the same exact thing. Here you can see I actually ordered it correctly, and I've put some comments in here about what's going on. So a really simple way of keeping track of everything, because what happens here is that when I play the home animation, then when I click on something else, it fades out the home animation as it fades in the next one. Same sort of thing here. Now I have not animated all the different text items, and so that's why you might see some of this stuff happening. But you'll notice that I do have the same problem with this method, and that is when I have text on the main timeline, I'll get to see it just slightly in between those transitions. So I still think that it might be best for the background to suddenly appear and then the other elements animate in. If you have a different way to handle this type of transitions within a Edge Animate project like Microsite, I would definitely be interested in hearing about it. So please leave some comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.